101 review. Book 101 is all about the books that I read for the last 40 years. And today I have my special guest. She's an entrepreneur, communication strategist, traveler, and big bold moves advocate. No other than Miss Angela Betancourt. Welcome to Book 101, Miss Angela, and can you please introduce more about yourself?
Absolutely. So excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me. As you mentioned, I'm a communications strategist. I've been working communications and marketing for over 20 years. And I also love traveling the world. And as you mentioned, I am a very, very big fan of big bold moves. It's a philosophy that I live my life by. And I'm just very excited to be here. Thank you.
Miss Angela, how do you define emotional connectivity in storytelling, and why is it more impactful than other forms of communication?
Absolutely. In today's day and age, as you know, technology really is making things so automated. With artificial intelligence, we have so many things right at the tip of our fingertips. And with social media, it's really easy to see what people are doing all around the world. And in some ways, we are brought together by technology, right? The ability to be able to do this podcast from different parts. And be able to connect in this way. But with the advancement of technology, it's really important to remember the human connection, to remember that we're not robots, we are not artificial intelligence, we're human beings that are living daily experiences. And when we're doing storytelling, whether it's in marketing or a PR strategy or journalism, whatever it might be, whenever we're telling a story, it's really important to put the person, the human, and all of their emotions at the center of that story. We are human beings with so many emotions. We experience emotions daily. And with everything that's going on in the world, it's important that we put all of that at the heart of our storytelling. And that way, no matter what technology is doing, no matter what things are getting automated, no matter what the other side of social media that sometimes keeps us disconnected, when emotional storytelling and really connecting to our humanity is extremely important when it comes to storytelling. Those are the things that bind us together. Those are the things that we all understand about each other. We understand each other's emotions. We understand our feelings, and it makes things relatable when we put that at the center of our stories.
Miss Angela Betancourt, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge to the world, as well as your business, and hoping for books also to come. What happens in the brain when a story creates a strong emotional connection, and how can storytellers leverage this?
Absolutely. When you make a strong connection, you're really connecting to that humanity of the person, which means that person can probably relate, right? If you put someone at the center of a story and that person's very happy and it's a happy story and it connects to something that we all experience, these moments of joy, maybe it's a family story, a feel good story. What happens in our brains is that we recognize that emotion. And so we're instantly able to connect on a deeper level to that story, right? Because we've all experienced joy, we've experienced sadness, we've experienced anger, we've experienced frustration. And when you tap into those emotions, when you're able to identify those emotions in a story and you put a person at the center of that, whoever's reading that story, watching that video, engaging with that story in whatever way, can recognize the emotion and therefore make a deeper connection, right? When you can relate to something, you can better engage with that content. We could see ourselves a little bit in that content, in that story. And that's extremely powerful because it means that you can understand on a deeper level the emotion that is coming out of this story. And that's incredibly, incredibly powerful. We hear words like, um, especially in the US, you hear a lot of things about pulling on the heartstrings and um, these feel good stories. When we hear those words, that terminology, what we're really talking about is we want people to feel a connection because when they feel a connection, they're more likely to take an action that we want them to take. So if you see a commercial that's really cute and you're like, oh my gosh, there's a cute dog in that commercial. I have a cute dog. There's a cute cat in that commercial. I have a cute cat. I can relate to what they're trying to say. You're more likely to buy the product or take whatever action it is that they want you to take.
Very well said, Miss Angela. Beautifully articulated. Are there specific themes or emotions that universally resonate across cultures, and how do you incorporate them into narratives?
Absolutely. It's those very basic emotions. Joy is a really big one that I think transcends culture, right? I've been lucky enough and blessed enough to travel into so many places, and I've seen joy in every culture that I've been to. And so joy is universal, right? Happiness is universal. Tapping into when you talk about a story of overcoming a challenge, that is universal because I I haven't met anyone that hasn't overcome something in their life, big or small. When you overcome that challenge, you can recognize that feeling of overcoming, of striving to do something, of working extremely hard so that you can provide for your family, working extremely hard so that you can build the life that you're trying to build. That is universal. So when we can tap into these very basic emotions, we are really tapping into a universal language that can be felt across culture. That's one of the things that I love so much about food, because food, no matter where you go, sitting in a group with people and sharing food is universal no matter what culture you're in. And that feeling, if you can capture that feeling of camaraderie, of sharing a meal, of breaking bread with someone, you are speaking a universal language. And so when you're thinking about storytelling, you want to tap into those feelings. You want to tap into that um, emotion that comes with sitting with other people and sharing a meal. I have many times where I've sat in a restaurant in a country where I don't speak the language, but certain gestures, smiling, nodding, were all things that I could do to communicate that I was enjoying this meal very, very much. And they understood that I was enjoying this meal and no words were exchanged. And so it's these types of feeling of pride, that you've created something that you're sharing with someone else who's enjoying it. These are all very universal emotions that are important to tap into when it comes to storytelling.
Indeed, I totally agree with you, Miss Angela. Why is vulnerability critical for building emotional bridges between storytellers and audiences?
Absolutely, because vulnerability means you're going a little bit below the surface. Um, in some cultures, I know in American culture, it's not always, people are not walking around with their emotions on their sleeve. right? You might not ever know what someone's actually going through, what challenges they're experiencing, what's going on in their lives by just looking at them. Um, you can never really know someone's true feelings about something, or how they view the world, or how they're interacting with their environment, without a little bit of vulnerability. Vulnerability helps to get to the core of an emotion, of a feeling, of a message. And so vulnerability is very important, but it's very, very hard to do because it requires a sense of exposure, of exposing something to someone who might not be receptive to what you're trying to say. And so vulnerability in its best case is a two-way street. I'm vulnerable and you're vulnerable. And so now we have the opportunity to really understand each other on a slightly deeper level. What is beneath the surface? If you can tap into um, what someone is really feeling and creating a safe space, because that's another thing, right? Vulnerability requires, for it to happen in the best way, it requires a safe space so that everyone feels comfortable and feels that they can share. And so vulnerability is extremely hard. And vulnerability comes with trust, right? You want to trust the other person when you're vulnerable. And so that's just human interaction. When it comes to storytelling and communications, PR, marketing, establishing trust with your audience is very important, and also, again, very hard to do. But when it happens, what basically means is this is a safe place for you, right? It's okay for you to feel what you're feeling in this space, because we're going to hold space for that. We're not going to ruin the moment by being distrustful. And so vulnerability is extremely important, and it's extremely valuable emotion. It's not even so much an emotion. It's really creating a space where you can feel your emotion in a safe environment. And that's extremely hard to do. And so um, I think vulnerability, if you want someone to be vulnerable, you should really think about your own vulnerability and what it's going to take to create an environment where everyone's comfortable, where you can really get to the root of an emotion. And there is where the truth is. There is where the most powerful storytelling can happen. When I think a lot about investigative journalism, and I see these journalists that uncover these difficult stories. They interview people that have just been through their worst day of their life, the worst moment of their life, and they're so open in sharing that. That vulnerability, you feel that because, wow, someone just shared something extremely difficult, and you are now on the receiving end of that very difficult emotion that you just encountered, that you're just engaging with. And so you're probably going to resonate with that person, right? You're probably going to feel something in return for that person who just opened up themselves to you. And so vulnerability is extremely important, especially for authentic storytelling.
Miss Angela, let's talk about crafting emotionally charged stories. How do you create characters or personas that audience feel for, even in nonfiction or business contexts?
Yeah, and that's a great question. And it really comes back to the same kind of idea around vulnerability and authenticity. Authenticity is the showing up in the truest sense of who you are. And so when you tap into these um, emotions, when you tap into vulnerability, when you tap into authenticity, and you show up your truest self, it's extremely, extremely powerful. Not only is authenticity a powerful tool for you, it's also extremely powerful for the other person, because it says, I'm here being my true self. And I'm going to, by being my true self, I hope to inspire for you to show up your true self. Being authentic is one of the best gifts you can give to someone because it means that you're allowing them space, you're giving them space, you're creating space. It's not even allowing, you're creating space for someone else to say, you know what, I'm going to show up my true self as well. I'm going to show up who I really am. And when you start showing up as who you really are, then you're telling the most authentic story you can tell. And now you're creating um, content, you're creating, you're writing, you're producing, you're showing up in the world and putting things out into the world that are rooted in authenticity. And that's extremely powerful for storytelling. That's extremely powerful for crafting messages that resonate with people because you're saying, listen, I'm not perfect. I'm I'm this that. I've been through this and that. I've decided to do this and this with my life. This is who I am. And everything that you create from that moment forward is going to be very pure in form. And I think that that is a type of story and content coming from a place of authenticity. You're writing narratives that are rooted in your truest self. And the person on the receiving end of that will recognize that, oh my goodness, this person is showing up as who they are. And the things that they're putting out into the world, the stories that they're telling, fall in line with that. And so how does that translate into business? And I think in business and in marketing, especially in communications, it comes back to values. Your values and your business values and the corporate values. We hear a lot about corporate values, but that really is a guiding principles about who you are or who your business is, what you're all about, how you function in the world, and the content that you create, the narratives that you're writing, the stories that you're telling should align with those values. Because the second that they don't, your customer is going to recognize something is off. And I hear a lot of content creators talking about this all of the time where they started doing content, and it was when they started showing up their truest selves and got more comfortable in who they are in front of the camera and telling their story, they saw a lot of growth. They saw a lot of people relating to them and engaging with the content. And in that is the essence of powerful storytelling. I hope that answered the question because I can go off in on these tangents all the time, but
Very well said. Very well said, Miss Angela. Very well said. So before we go on, we'll continue our discussion for today. I want to shout out my daily ranks for the ranking tops in the last 30 days because in Mali I got number nine on the Apple chart. United Arab Emirates 11, El Salvador 13, Uruguay, Norway, Canada, Slovenia, Macedonia, and many more. Thank you so much for 154 countries listening to this podcast. I hope you will continue listening and support all my podcasts. And Miss Angela, how did you identify what emotions your audience craves or needs to feel in given context?
that's a great question. And it's interesting because I think there isn't one answer. I do a lot of work in the climate space and social impact space. And with climate change and anything around that conversation, I I think what people really want is hope that despite what we see in the news or despite what decisions are happening or what actions are happening or not happening in relation to the environment, people want to be hopeful. They want to be hopeful that people out there are fighting the good fight, are doing the work, are being advocates for nature and for the things that they care about. And so I really think a lot about what's important to my clients, what's important to people that are care about nature, and hope and optimism are always topics that come up in a space when we hear a lot of doom and gloom around various issues around the world with pertaining to the environment and nature and climate. And so it's not so much one emotion as much as it is um, really thinking about what is the message that is going to resonate with people the most. And I listen to what people are saying online, and I listen, I go to conferences and my colleagues and people in this space, and I do a lot of reading of what's going on, and I really try to keep up to date with what's happening in the industry. And I keep seeing words like hope and optimistic and um, the next generation and future generations and people that are out there being really passionate about the work. And so I pay very close attention to these emotions that people are feeling. I also get, based on conversations and meetings and travels and conferences, that there's also a lot of frustration. And so I think about frustration and what does that mean? What does that mean for my audiences, for current clients, future clients? How do I take that feeling of frustration? And when I think about feelings of frustration, I turn to the incredible businesses and organizations that Betancourt Group works with that are doing great things. And I'm like, it doesn't solve every problem in the world, but it offers a real solution. People that have real solutions to some of these challenges. And that then turns back into the conversation around hope and optimism. And so I think about the industry. I think about what are the pain points, what's happening in the news, what's happening at these conferences, what are people talking about on these panels, and all of these things are what I pay attention to determine what is the feeling, what are people feeling right now, how can Betancourt Group help address that, right? Can we bring a little bit more joy to people with good news and good content? Can we highlight the work that some of our clients is doing that really is making impact in communities, and use that as a demonstration that no matter what's going on, there are people out there doing great work and making great strides. And so it's really about listening, which is extremely important. It circles back out there with being an authentic person, practicing authenticity, thinking about vulnerability. Listening is also extremely important in communications and marketing. You want to listen to what people are saying. I hear the phrase all the time. Check the temperature. What is going on? What is the collective overwhelming feeling that you're getting? And so there's many ways to figure out what those feelings are, but listening is at the core of that.
Listening indeed. People, you need to have the passion of listening. Miss Angela, before we wrap up our discussion for today, I'm inviting you to please do listen to my other podcast, people, because my abstract essay is already in fifth season, abstract poetry in second season, book 101 review in fifth season, and of course, my comedy 101 in second season, food 101 in fifth season, geography 101 in fourth season, and love letters in third season as well. Mental Health 101 is my baby podcast, a movie 101 review, and music 101 in its fourth season, and science 101 and sex 101 in its first season. Please listen to them wherever you listen your podcast. So, Miss Angela, what one practice people can start today to become more intentional about emotional connectivity in their storytelling?
Yes. And the first step I would say is think about these terms that we've talked about, vulnerability and authenticity. And whether that's a journaling practice of just sitting down one day and really thinking about what those words mean to you. What does authenticity mean to you? What does vulnerability mean to you? And really thinking about that and how it relates to your own life. Because behind every story, that's not AI generated, but behind, and those are still prompts in many ways. But for the most part, behind every story is a human being. And behind every marketing campaign, PR campaign, advertising campaign, creative campaign, there are human beings, there are people, and people that have feelings and emotions and interesting perspectives in the world and views on issues that are different from the other person. And we all have that essence of who we are, that is extremely important. So think about what that is, because when you, and it's interesting because I also practice what I preach. I think constantly about how I can show up my most authentic self. Is there something I'm afraid of? Is there something that holds me back from expressing something? And maybe I can journal about it, but I always try to figure out how I can be more vulnerable, show up my most authentic self, because that means that everything I do will come from that lens, come from that perspective, which means more authentic storytelling, more vulnerable storytelling. And it gives me a little bit of more empathy towards other people and know that they're probably going through their own authentic journey. They're probably going through their own vulnerability journey. And when we just connect with each other in that human way, then the our actions therefore are going to be more authentic, more rooted in these universal emotions. And that will ultimately translate to better storytelling in your podcast, in your business, in whatever that you're doing. And so that's what I would say is, take a walk or journal or go online, read a little bit, some articles about vulnerability and around authenticity, and figure out what those words really mean for you, because how you show up in that way is going to be how you show up in other areas of your life, in your work, in your content creation, in your storytelling. And that's going to be extremely important. Do these things align with your values? And if you're not sure, then think about your values, and your values can change as you evolve. So that's one thing I would say. And I think just quickly on that note is, when you start thinking about your true self and showing up that way and really kind of doing that reflective work, you start to you're probably going to start to think about other areas of your life that are requiring some more of your attention, and that are um, asking to see the sun, to be put out into the world, whether that's a project, whether it's a story that you've always wanted to write, a book you've always wanted to write, a comic strip, whatever. Once we start tapping into that, then we really start tapping into these other creative processes and storytelling capabilities. And that ultimately kind of really connects to my philosophy of big, bold moves and what happens when you pay attention to those um, those insights that come up when you start reflecting and thinking about authenticity, thinking about vulnerability. These insights come up that oftentimes lead to these big, bold moves in life. So, those, I would say, really think about authenticity, think about vulnerability, what that means for you in your life.
Miss Angela, wisdom and knowledge to the world. So, can you please invite our listeners to support your business itself?
Yes, absolutely. If you go to it's a business self Betancourt group, the website is that reverse, so groupbetancourt.com. I'm also on LinkedIn. If you want to find me on LinkedIn, I'm Angela Betancourt. These are great ways that you can find me. I also have a personal blog at angiebetancourt.com. You can go there too. I'm an occasional blogger, but these are all ways that you can connect with me. But I highly recommend through right here on the website, through Contact Us, you can send a message there. You can connect with me directly on LinkedIn if you want to send me a message on LinkedIn. Betancourt Group offers 30-minute consultations. So if you're curious about, your own storytelling and communications and marketing for your small business or startup, you can definitely reach me there, and we can have a conversation.
Yes, people, let's support Miss Angela Betancourt because if you support her, more empowering business to come. So, Miss Angela, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been lovely. Thank you.
More to come, people. See you soon.